If you want a man that plays guitar, Jonathan plays will play you the guitar as well. Okay, so we are obviously recording live from my office. Jonathan is recording from his apartment in Philly. But guys, welcome to the Essential Podcast. We're happy to have you guys here. And we're going to be talking about some stuff today. The main topic that we're going to be talking about today is really just defending the faith because some interesting things happened to me this past weekend. I know I called you right after Jonathan because I was trying to get you in the Twitter space. I told you about it, I think, the next day, but basically, oh guys, by the way, please do me a favor and like and subscribe and ring the notification bell so you know when we post. But I got invited to a Twitter space, and basically it was me going 1-on-2 versus it was me versus basically these like atheists, and they were basically trying to debate me on whether God is real, on whether the Bible is real, and on the teaching of Jesus and Paul and the Old Testament, etc. and etc. And so basically, to kind of sum up this whole thing, because I know you guys know, but for the listeners, all they really did was just take things out of context the whole entire time. They didn't really uh give the reasoning wasn't really anything that was fire, like it didn't nothing really like challenged me. And they just a lot of it was just misinterpretation and ignorance, because they're just reading verses, and then they're just like taking them as they are, like there's no context to what's being said. Like they're not reading passages, they're just pulling verses out.
Well,
When we
Steve,
all know
yeah,
we don't just take one verse, we read passages, bro. So yeah, it was a very interesting, but I think the main thing is this, and I kind of said this when I first got in the Twitter space to kind of keep them in this trap. I said, no matter what you say, right, at the end of the day, you have to have a relationship with Jesus for everything to work. And so I think the core reason why they really couldn't get past like certain topics was because they were approaching the Bible from a scientific view. And I just kept saying, like, without a spiritual relationship to God, like you won't like understand.
yeah.
And so that was kind of the consensus. He was like, yeah, well then I guess I'll never understand. I was like, yeah, so like this debate needs to stop because you don't get what I'm saying because you don't have a relationship with God at all. So hold on. Jonathan, you all right?
Yeah, yeah, Steve. That's what people do, man. Like I was actually just talking to somebody on Instagram. Like he's all like, it was just like a post, and he's all like, man, f the Bible, because the guy was basically telling him how porn is bad and how you got to go to the gym and read the Bible to get your life right. And the guy's like, oh, f the Bible. Why would you listen to a bunch of priests who killed and did bad things? And and I'm all like, well, dude, like that was like the early Catholic church that did that. Like they even persecuted early Christian church. Like if you really want to like get your facts straight, like actually learn about early Christian martyrs and and actually read the Bible, because they got persecuted. Like the early Christians got persecuted because they wanted to actually live as the Bible taught, because the Catholics had twisted ideology and doctrines. So it's like people always take things out of context. Like they just they're told one thing, and they just run off with it, but then they never really do the research themselves. They learn one thing, and they never actually like do the research themselves to further know the truth about something. And yeah, he's all like, F Bible, religion, it's a tool used to prey on the weak minded, and an excuse for the priests that beat it, raped, and killed children and gays. Those priests are no better than Hitler. But like that's not that's like what he's referring to, like that's not the Christian church. That's like the early Catholics that did all of that with the crusades and you know. And it's like, dude, like they even persecuted the Christians who that wanted to live like the Bible, that went against the doctrines of the early Catholic Church, and so it's like like if you really want to like know about, I guess, Bible history or Christian history, because the Bible isn't a bad book. It's a good book. It changes your life. It gets your life fixed. You get, it helps you create discipline, and but he doesn't understand that because, he was probably taught that, about the Crusades rather than the Reformation of the church and that
Yeah, but
aspect of
yeah, but like, and that's history that doesn't get talked about, And I think we were saying this, or I
it. Yeah,
think me and you were saying this on the other episode, and I was saying that like a lot of churches love to teach biblical, stuff, which is great. Like I'm obviously I have nothing against teaching the Bible, but we also have to know our history as well, because our history is a really big part of our faith today. Because people love saying that Christianity is a white man's religion when most of our church fathers were of African descent, and people, but bro, people don't know that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
People love saying that Christianity got big during slavery. People don't understand. Africans were practicing Christianity way before slavery ever happened. Christianity was pinching the world hundreds of years before it even touched America. Like, come on, man. Like,
Yeah, let me
yeah,
let me touch on this. So I think what happens when you approach somebody and you get in a debate, a lot of times somebody gonna come from a defensive heart because they put their standards on maybe a pastor or priest they saw, and you can't look
right,
through Christianity through the view of one man who we know is human. That's why you got to have a relationship through Jesus. That's why you got to look through Jesus when when you're going through your walk of faith. So it's like
right,
coming from a small scope of a perspective. You got to come from a perspective of Jesus. Like that's why it's Christianity is revolved around Christ. It's not revolved around one person's mistakes, and that's where people get it wrong. Or they come from a position where they were a Christian and they got hurt by another Christian, and it's the same defensive heart mechanism that somebody builds. Like somebody builds like this tolerance, and they like, I can't stand because I don't want to go through that. I can't stand the way they do this, or the way so and so says this at church, or whatever, how church people are. It's a wrong view that people get, and if you don't have a relationship, like Steve said, it's hard to really like understand.
yeah,
yeah,
So
yeah. No, and I agree with you. No, it's not. You can't, and that's why Christianity is such a different, religion. It's not. You can't base it off. Um, you can't base it so much on your teachers. Like you can allow them to shepherd you, yes, but ultimately the mediator is Jesus, and you have to spend time with them.
right.
Um, yeah. So at the end of the day,
right,
yes, it's a relationship beyond anything. I mean, it's a religion, but
exactly.
it is a relationship.
Exactly. Because the way that I broke it down to the guy that I was debating, I was saying, hey bro, I was like, you have to see that this most Christians get saved before they ever crack open a Bible. I was like, like salvation for a Christian, like in the Western church, they're usually not touching a Bible until like a week or two after they're saved, or like the day after. I was like, so because he was saying like, how could someone believe this? I was like, you have to believe in the existence of Jesus to believe in the supernatural things of the Bible. Like, if you don't believe that, you'll never
Or
ever understand anything in the
or it
Bible.
could be the other way around, where someone can read the Bible and be brought up reading it their whole lives and never know Jesus.
I agree.
So
And then they put the Bible over God. Basically, was saying like
yeah,
all that matters is the Word of God. The Word of God does matter, but Jesus is not more important than the Bible. Like, Jesus is our number one. And I do think that relationships and scripture reading goes together. I'm not saying one is more important
yeah,
than the other, but sometimes as Christians we can champion the Bible over Jesus,
No,
where
yeah,
all it is, where
yeah,
all it can be about is just a word and that's it.
yeah,
But like some people, they know every Bible verse but have no prayer life whatsoever.
yeah.
right, yeah, and that's interesting how like you say that like most Christians have an encounter before cracking open the Bible. Like when I was younger, I was raised a Christian, but but like, you know, and we would read the Bible and stuff. But it wasn't until I had that experience where it's like, okay, let me know more about this, you know. So like, that is an interesting perspective. Um, and
Exactly.
most Christians, yeah,
And I'm not knocking the idea that someone could come to Christ by reading the word.
No, absolutely
But
not.
for most of my experiences, and probably most that you've seen, most conversions happen with a experience. And you know, it's like I had this experience where Jesus enters my heart, the Holy Spirit is here. Then as I am chasing after God, I will get a hunger for the word to understand more about how to live my life.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
and then
And that's
that's
usually the order that it goes in the Western church, at least.
yeah, and that's where, you know, your discipline in life starts to come into play. You know, your prayer and reading, and then I think that
Mhm.
falls more into like the physical aspect, going to the gym, and then the finance. So like it all,
And
like, you know, it all creates an order
but
in your
that's
life.
where, but and that's where I think our society and the Western church, I think that that's where we are getting caught up because we just stop there and that's it, you
Mhm.
know. And then we just do the same things every year. We do 40 days of prayer every year. We do an Easter service every year, and in my opinion, I don't think that's where the Christians should stop. I think after you get a hold of that, then you should be moving on to learn about learn about our church history.
Right. I
Like
agree.
you should be learning about the Reformation. You should be learning about the Desert Fathers and the people that literally left the city and went into the desert to spend time with Jesus for years.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
but we just stop at this. Okay, my finances are right. I'm reading my Bible every day. I'm praying so many times. I'm praying with other people, which I'm not saying they're bad things. I'm not saying that, but you can literally miss everything that Christianity has when you are just focusing on those two things. When you only focus on being saved and just discipline.
Yeah. And I mean, let's tie back to what we're talking about, like defending faith. Like it's important to always keep growing your relationship with Christ because you're gonna have those people like out there in the world like that's going to try to tempt you to bring you back down to like living like in a like living a sinful life how it's okay like but every time you grow your relationship and this is not really like defending, this is more just acknowledging like what's going on around you. Your relationship with Christ is so deep, you feel the Holy Spirit like telling you, guiding you like no, this is not right, like let me not do this, let me not reach back to my ways. That's why it's important to always keep growing your relationship so you always be aware of what's going on around you. You know? And to those like that try to, you might say like, oh no, nah, man, I don't drink. Like that's not who I am. And so I'm like, oh no, just one drink, man. It's not that bad. Like it won't hurt you. Like it's Jesus. You know, Jesus turned into wine, and this is like I hear that so much, and it's just like you gotta be aware of what is being told to you, and it's like you gotta be able to speak and be like, all right, well, nah, this is not, and then be able to be correct in the right way.
Yeah.
If that makes
that's
sense.
I like how you. That's always the excuse. Oh, Jesus turned water to wine. You know, like that's what they use to kind of like get you to drink with them. They always use that. It's like,
I mean, but like, you know, but I also think that like Christians overdo it as well. Like I feel like we put such a damper on like drinking and tattoos because like me personally, and this is my opinion, you know, like I really believe that a lot of times I can really sometimes I feel like we have to, you know, abstain from some things, right? I'm never going to cheat on my wife, right?
fair
Jonathan,
enough.
you yeah, and I would die. Jonathan, like you don't want to have sex before marriage. You as well. You don't have sex before marriage. You don't want to. There's certain things that we all try to abstain from, but I do believe there are some things that can be manageable. And I feel like sometimes it is very weak and cowardly to just abstain from something that you could probably manage. So like for me, like I know for drinking, like I used to have a drinking problem, but now, you know, God's delivered me to a place where I can manage that, you know, to where like I can have a cup of wine and that's it. I don't need anything more. Like I'm
Yeah.
chilling, you know. And like I feel like as Christians, we have so many people, definitely young people that come into our churches, and they feel like, I don't want to say judged, because I think being judged is a good thing, but they feel super outcasted by their own people because they can manage these things. And this is where I want to kind of take the next part of our conversation is
Can I
is
say
that
something real quick before you transition to
yeah,
that?
go ahead.
I want to clarify what I mean by that is like, if you could stand in a room and you're around a group of people who try to get you to do things that are outside of, you know, what you believe in your values with Christ.
Yeah.
To be able to stand firm, like in that, like that's what I mean. Not to come off where you because sometimes it could come off like you sound judgmental around people. That's kind of how I sound, like, oh, you do this, like I'm a Christian, so like I don't do this, and y'all are belittled. Like, nah, it's just like standing firm on your values. That's what I mean.
Exactly. Well, and I wasn't sure. I'm not trying to context bend what you say, like what you said, but I'm trying to use your example to push the idea of how hard do we push our convictions on other people, and how that hurts our whole entire mission. Because, like, you know, and I feel like as in the debate, one of the Christians in the chat that got cooked because he was just so off, he started pushing a conviction on the atheists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And basically his conviction was obviously to save the lost, like you could tell, but the way he was doing it was so crazy. Because because bro, look, right, when I first came into the Twitter space, so some girl said, "Oh, here comes another devil worshiper," talking about me. And then the guy, like later on in the conversation, he was like, you are Satanist, you are this, you're that. And like, he's using his conviction to, you know, call out that stuff, but it came out like totally like the wrong way. So like, when you are defending the faith, you also have to stay in a calm manner. You can't get emotional.
Yeah. You gotta act in love, man. You can't
Exactly. Exactly. Unless if it's someone you know for real, like me and him, or me and you, we could get like aggressive, and there's no personal vendetta to it, because you know me, you know how I act. You know what I mean? But when you're debating someone you don't know, you know, like on a Twitter space, you have to be able to, you know. And Jesus was the best communicator.
Yeah, he's the example of how you communicate.
He was a clear talker. He was very straightforward with what he said. You know what I mean? And us as Christians, like when you are debating the faith, I think a big thing that makes a lot of Christians lose the debates isn't that they know the facts, but the way that they're presenting those facts.
Yeah, because it could come from us as like very defensive, you know. So
exactly, and
that's the nature.
And what's the point of getting the defensive if you know the truth?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So, and like I think that verse that that Paul says has changed my whole entire outlook, because they try to put the judgment card, and I said, look, I said it is not my job to judge you. I don't have to judge you. God's going to judge you. Like I was like, no offense, but like, I mean, I don't really have to worry about you guys. Like I am praying for you guys that don't know Christ. And you know, when I get the opportunity, like I'm out here trying to like talk to Jesus about people, not trying to force it, but you know, when it's there, you know what I mean? But my job isn't to judge you. That is another thing that a lot of Christians do, is that they're judging the world. That's not our job. So
yeah.
And the sad part is, right, we're judging the world so hard, but then when the world converts themselves to Christ, they see how we're judging the world, but we're not judging the people inside our church. That's the main problem of the issue. It's like, dude, it's crazy.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. Yeah. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's just truth, obviously. So, but yeah, so I kind of want to get into another part about like defending the faith is like, so one of the guys, and I just want you guys to clarify to our listeners.
Yeah, what did he say? Like tell us like again, like
Yes.
well, told me,
So,
but I don't remember.
so one of the things he said that was wild was I think I told you about this, Jonathan. He was telling me that like he was saying when Jesus was in the womb of Mary, was Mary of the divine nature because Jesus was in her body. Like, does she become God for the time that she's pregnant because Jesus is in her stomach? And I obviously said, I was like, she could say that if she wanted to, but it's not true. You know what I mean? Jesus is his own person. Like, I mean, so I mean, Jonathan, you answered that as well. You know?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, excuse me. Like before we get to the story of Jesus, there's the whole like lineage of like the bloodline. Um, it was just all planned out from God from the get go. You know, the bloodline of David. Um, but it doesn't mean that she's divine. It just means that it was orchestrated in a way where God just like wanted. But like it's pure human. Like David was a divine, you know, Jacob and all of these other bloodlines. Like it's pure human, and it just comes from God. But I don't believe in the whole divine stuff.
Me either. The second thing that they asked me was they asked me, do I put Adam and Jesus as equal? Because they were like, Adam wasn't born from anyone, so does that make him more of the son of God than Jesus himself?
Oh well, I mean, before he sinned, maybe, but he sinned, so no.
And that's right. And that's what I said. I said, I said Adam was perfect for a moment, but when he sins, he's he's human just like us at that point. So
Yeah, I mean,
um
I can understand that. I
hmm?
guess
Yeah,
interpretation because
no, I mean like Jesus is God, but I was using the point of like Adam was perfect, like Jesus was also perfect. I'm not saying
yeah,
that
like
Adam was God, but Adam was a perfect being for a time,
Oh, I thought,
yeah,
and then
Jesus is also called the second Adam for a reason, and that's
exactly.
because he's perfect and
but it's like you
divine.
said, man, it's a lot of things that could be taken out of context.
Mhm.
Like it's a lot of things from the Bible that
Yes,
could be taken out,
yes,
and I mean, anything could be read and it could be taken out of context, and you can create honestly a debate out of everything, but just if not knowing, then
yeah. And one of the other verses that they took so out of context was, I think it's either in Revelation or Hebrews, but don't you know the verse when Paul was like, you need to live your life like Jesus is about to come back, like right now.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
he took, I think it was the Message, or he took a version and he read, and the version read as saying like, he tried to twist it to say Paul was saying that he is predicting when Jesus is coming back. So that makes that makes the Bible false because Jesus didn't come back in Paul's time.
oh no.
And I was like, bro. And
I
so then I literally got up, Nairi and Jonathan, grabbed my Bible. I said, show me the verse. And I was like, dude, this is so out of context. And luckily, my Bible has the Greek translation right into English.
English, yeah.
So I was like, dude, this is so wrong.
Yeah.
Which opens up another question that I have, which I'm researching now, was like, if all these people wrote the Bible from different parts of the world, is Greek the actual like finalized translation? Like if like maybe there was a bunch of other languages that the Bible was written as well. Just a question.
I think
well, Greek was the primary language at the time of like the apostles,
Around the world.
and
Hmm.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
kind of it was like English because the Greeks were ruling in that era.
Okay,
So
yeah.
so Greek was the dominant language. So which is why because I remember I mentioned this before. It's I always find it funny how people say, "Oh, the Bible was translated over time, so it loses its value, like original text or whatever." But literally, like the Greek language still exists, so we can always go back to the original language and learn
Exactly.
the Bible. So like it's not now, if you're talking about the Old Testament, that's a little different because now it's like the Hebrew language and like Jews wasn't always Jews; they were Israelites. So, but the
Yeah,
New Testament comes from Greek.
exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of the languages. There's going to be a lot of languages and interpretations, but the point I was going to say is that it's the way that we perceive it ourselves, like the way we read it and the relationship that we have with God. Like I think, I guess necessarily I don't see it as like one true language. I just see it as like when you read, it's like you're reading the word of God. So it's like the way you read it, no matter what translation or what language, it's how you interpret it from your relationship with God. That makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it depends what you're reading. Like if you're reading like the Proverbs or like Psalms, especially the Psalms, considering they're like more of like songs.
No,
Um,
what I'm saying is that like no matter what language or what interpretation you read it in, like it's still how can how can I explain this? It's like your one-on-one.
So basically, you're saying because like the way that my mom taught me was like the Bible confirms what God is trying to tell you. So basically, you're saying like your relationship with God tells you something, and then the Bible is like the confirmation,
Yeah,
no matter what.
no matter what
Okay,
the
okay,
yeah.
I get you saying. Okay,
no, yeah. I get that.
yeah. So yeah,
There's
I
just
mean,
there's just some things like I don't know if it's just me, but like when you're reading like let's say Deuteronomy, like you can't interpret the gold and all the
but
like
exactly,
like
exactly.
that.
So let's address this here
Mhm.
for you, Bible, for people who don't know like the Bible. Is this? This is the number one rule. If a law is repeated in the New Testament that was in the Old Testament, it's the law that we follow now.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
it is not repeated in the New Testament and is still in the Old Testament, we don't follow that law. So, guys, we can shave.
Like eating meat,
We
eating
can eat
meat.
meat. Jesus
Because
doesn't repeat that. We
yeah,
don't have to do actual sacrifices anymore. We don't got to do that.
no,
You know, the Old Testament is descriptive. There is a lot that to take from the Old Testament. I'm not saying that, but it is a descriptive book collection
yeah, it's very
collection of books.
descriptive. Yeah,
And when Jesus comes, that is when we enter the book. Right when Jesus comes, then we need to
yeah,
like okay, now this
yeah,
this is the life I need to live. Like you know what I mean?
yeah.
And yes, Proverbs has and let's also talk about Proverbs. You can follow the things that Proverbs says and still not get the results that Proverbs says that you'll get. Just like the proverb that says, right, train up a child, right? So that they would never abandon it, right? How many Christian kids do you know where their parents have trained them up in the faith and they're just elsewhere? You
I
know,
don't know. I mean, we'll
but
see. Because
hold on, but so many people approach these verses thinking that they're just meant to get the result, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. You know, like
yeah,
sometimes
no,
you won't get that result. And yeah,
and
so like
and
you have to take these books and verses with the actual context.
yeah, and I mean the Ecclesiastes even says it like a righteous person can do all good deeds and still have a bad life where the wicked does bad stuff but like live prosperous, and then he says that's why life is meaningless. But yeah, like it's just that's just how it is sometimes. It's that there is like stuff for us to follow, but ultimately God is the one who I guess dictates how everything plays out in your life, and because he's the one that there's that other verse where it says a man plans his life, but God is the one who you know allows it to allows things
Establishes
to
the
happen.
steps, which is
Yeah,
my life verse actually.
But yeah,
there you go.
that's why I think a lot of if someone's reading and they're reading the Old Testament and then they flip to the New Testament, it could come off confusing to someone that's just reading it for the first time, or someone that wants to take it out of context. It's like why has this happened before? But then I just flip later on into the part where I Google it, and someone's debating, and it's like, but this is what it says in the Bible, and it's like, well, you gotta know, like, this is before Jesus came, so it's like there's a lot of parts of the Bible that you got to understand when telling somebody. And that's even if you go to somebody and telling the story of Jesus, and even from the beginning, like it all connects somehow to tell somebody the story.
Exactly.
So
That's
So,
the that's
mhm.
the beautiful thing about of this Christian church is that you're not ultimately you're not supposed to study the Bible by yourself. That's why fellowshipping is important. Communion, stuff like this. You have people to surround yourself with because it's not meant for you to walk alone. It's not meant for you to study by yourself. That's why you have pastors, youth leaders, friends, because this is what it's about. It's about us, having those conversations, having that honesty, transparent moment with each other. That's what it ultimately is about.
Exactly. And that is why, you know, like when you do get into these debates or, healthy, and it was a healthy debate, there was no beef. When you get into these healthy conversations, you have to know your stuff, and like as a Christian, like I expect a lot of Christians to know church history, to know these things because I do think that when people know, more about our history, it makes people understand a little bit more. And like, don't knock the idea that there are hundreds of Christians that have lived this life, that have written amazing books, that have amazing outlooks on the Bible that you don't even know of. Like a lot of our worldviews are formed by Bible teachers from hundreds of like years ago. So you have to be able to understand that idea and take the meat from a lot of these writers and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Because that worldview is important because it's going to ultimately dictate how you um, go about your life. It's like what I know it's might sound controversial, but it's like what Jeffrey Dahmer said. Like the reason he did all those crimes was because no, listen. The reason he did all of those crimes was because his worldview was evolution, and since we came from nothing, was the point of life. So he didn't really value the significance of a human life. But when he learned about Christianity and that Jesus died, then he his mindset changed. At least that's what he says. And I just found that interview really interesting because it really, like, the Bible says it, like what you think is what that's how, like, everything that flows in your heart, that's it's ultimately going to dictate your life. And so your worldview that's why it's important to learn about truth, learn about the actual truth and the actual history of certain things, so that ultimately your life flows in a way where it's truthful. It's not there's no deception. So that's why truth is important. That's why seeking the actual truth and significance of Christian history. That's why it's important, because it's plagued with deception. You have so-called Christians killing people, but that's not what Jesus was teaching. And you had the early Christians who wanted to live like Jesus and wanted the Bible for themselves, but they couldn't because it was ruled by the priests who ultimately had the knowledge. And learning that history, we become more appreciative of our faith because we learn that our early brothers and sisters, they died for us to live the freedom we have now. Like, everybody can have access to the Bibles on their phones. There's no excuse,
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly. Even reflecting, right? Like Martin Luther King Day, uh MLK Day was just on Monday, and
Oh, no,
like
wait. Yeah, yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because Martin Luther, that's not his real name. His real name is Michael King Jr., but he adopted the name Martin Luther because of the original Martin Luther, the historic figure. He had a trip and he learned about the early Christian martyrs, and he saw what was happening with the early churches was happening with the blacks. And so he adopted the name Martin Luther because he wanted to I guess he had like a spiritual awakening, and he adopted that name and decided to do something about what was happening
yep.
with the blacks. But his original name is Michael King Jr.
Yeah, yeah, and so thinking about like to me, Martin Luther King is a pillar for the early church as well. Like Martin Luther King took like his life got taken away defending life. You know what I mean? And Martin Luther King just didn't stand up for just Christians. This man stood up for every person.
Yeah.
Dude just wanted like, and we all know he might have done some foul things, like whatever. Like I get it, but this man stood up for all people, and so and to think that a local church pastor could make a could make such a political run by just loving people is crazy. And just maybe reflecting on what Christians did during the civil rights movement could teach us how we can act in today's world. Maybe just seeing how reacting to violence with violence, to hate with hate, to rude video with rude video, but just having conversations with people and loving on them, even if they're mean to you, you still show them the love back. Maybe that's the road that we have to follow to get to a place where there is some type of level of respect. So
And also
yeah.
defending your faith.
And also defending your faith well.
Yeah.
Without hatred,
Yeah.
in your heart.
I think the reason we don't see a lot of that is because in order for you to do that, you have to be really educated, you have to know your stuff. And it's just easier to just fight, I guess, verbally with one another rather than actually spend time learning certain things and learning more about your faith and your history. Because all of that ultimately takes time. And, we all love to play video games. We love to just watch, TV and sports, which nothing is wrong, nothing wrong with that. But it is important to, educate yourself.
I agree.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So yeah, guys. I'm gonna wrap it up here, but this was a great episode, guys. So I mean, this episode we just talked about the early church and talked about defending your faith. Like defending your faith is like, to me, it is an essential as a Christian. How can you invite others to meet Christ if you don't know anything about him?
Right.
and not just knowing things about him, but if you don't know the history, behind our golden faith. So
Well, hit the outro. Why you stop?
you have any finishing comments?
Yeah. I want the guitar, but I kind of good with my voice.
Hey, yo, play.
Or you try to make that statement. We gotta always make sure we maintain that forever. So that is maintaining that most important to most important, that is our relationship with Jesus.
I feel like when I'm playing, it's like I feel like it's interrupting the audio. I don't know.
It is a little bit, but it's all good. Any finishing comments?
Yo, man, just like keep with the faith. If you're gonna call yourself a Christian, know where it comes from. Know about your history. There's nothing. I think that's important. I think if you're going to take up the title of Christian, I think it's important to not only know the teachings of Jesus, obviously, but like look at the history too, because again, our early brothers and sisters, they bled for us to be where we are, and I think it's important to respect that. Um, And if you ever come across people who wants to argue and fight with you about your belief, just just love them. Like just love them before you even try to debate them. Just understand why they're saying what they're saying, because it's always rooted on something. Like it's either rooted on like church hurt or like I don't know, like religion. It's always rooted. So like if you can just try to understand them first before you start debating or like educating them, do that, because then they'll see that love, and ultimately that love just like it always draws people in. um and yeah, man, God bless, stay safe, keep with the faith.
All right, y'all. We are the modern church fathers. I'm kidding. Kidding. We love you guys. We hope you guys like. And guys, remember, like and subscribe. Ring the notification bell so you know when we post. Follow us on Instagram where we're around. So have a wonderful day and peace out.